Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, by Greg McKeown. Picture this moment in your mind. Your beautiful newborn daughter, just hours old, is nestled peacefully in your wife's exhausted but loving arms. The hospital room is quiet. This should be one of those sacred, untouchable moments in your life. Pure peace, pure joy. But your phone won't stop buzzing. Your email is exploding. There's a client meeting happening, and a colleague has actually written to you. It would be a bad time to have a baby because I need you at this meeting. Even though every fiber of your being knows exactly where you should be, there's this powerful magnetic pull in another direction. The need to please everyone. The need to appear reliable. The fear of letting the team down. So, with a sinking feeling in your gut, you say yes. And to your eternal shame, you actually leave your wife and your hours-old baby in that hospital room, and you go to the meeting. You walk in expecting your client to be blown away by your dedication. Instead, their faces tell you everything. You can practically read their minds. What on earth are you doing here? And right there, it hits you like a truck. You've made the worst trade imaginable. You sacrificed what mattered most for something that, in the end, meant absolutely nothing. In fact, that meeting produced exactly 0 results. This isn't some made-up cautionary tale. This actually happened to Greg McKeown, the author of the book we're exploring today, Essentialism. And that gut-wrenching experience taught him a lesson that would transform his life, and eventually the lives of millions. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else absolutely will. Hello, and welcome. Today we're diving into a book that's so much more than a productivity guide. It's actually a philosophy for how to live. Essentialism has sold millions of copies worldwide, and been translated into countless languages. Not because it offers some clever tricks, but because it speaks to something universal that so many of us feel. Being frantically busy, but never truly productive. Overworked but underutilized. Constantly in motion but getting nowhere fast. Greg McKeown, a brilliant strategist who's worked with some of Silicon Valley's biggest success stories, found himself caught in exactly this trap. His own success became a paradox. The more opportunities that flooded in, the more scattered his focus became, and, ironically, the less actual impact he was making. So he embarked on a mission to discover a different approach, a better way, an escape route from what he calls the undisciplined pursuit of more toward embracing the disciplined pursuit of less. And that's exactly what I'm offering you today. Over the next little while, we're walking the path of the Essentialist together. You're going to discover a powerful, potentially life-altering framework for identifying what's absolutely essential in your life, ruthlessly eliminating everything that isn't, and building a system that makes doing the most important things almost effortless. This isn't about cramming more into your day. It's about finally getting the right things done. So find yourself a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let's dive into the heart of Essentialism. Let's start with a simple visual. Imagine a circle representing all your time and energy in a single day. For most people, the non-essentialist, as McKeown calls them, that energy looks like a firework exploding in every direction. Little arrows of effort shooting out everywhere. An arrow for that email you didn't need to answer. An arrow for that meeting you shouldn't have attended. An arrow for that favor you felt guilty saying no to. An arrow for mindlessly scrolling social media. By day's end, you've burned through all your energy, but only made a millimeter of progress in a million different directions. You're completely exhausted, yet you look back wondering, what did I actually accomplish today? Now imagine a different circle, the Essentialist's circle. Here, all that same energy channels into a single, powerful arrow moving in one crystal-clear direction. The result isn't tiny progress everywhere. It's a massive breakthrough on the one thing that truly matters. This right here captures the core difference between a life lived by default and a life lived by design. The non-essentialist becomes a victim of everyone else's agendas. The essentialist writes their own story. But how do we actually get there? It feels like the entire world is conspiring against us. McKeown argues we're caught in a perfect storm of non-essentialism. First, we're drowning in choices. For the first time in human history, we have an almost infinite menu of things we could be doing, and it's completely overwhelming. Psychologists call this decision fatigue. The more choices we make, the worse our decision quality becomes. Second, there's crushing social pressure. Technology hasn't just given us information overload. It's given us opinion overload. Everyone has thoughts about what we should be doing, what we should care about, what we should say yes to. And third, there's the most dangerous myth of all, the idea that you can have it all. We're constantly told we can be a perfect parent, a top-performing employee, a pillar of the community, maintain peak physical fitness, and have a thriving social life, all simultaneously. This myth has led us to the absurd reality of talking about our priorities, plural. But the word priority, McKeown points out, was singular for 500 years. It meant the very first thing, the one thing before all others. By pluralizing it, we tried to bend reality, to convince ourselves we could have multiple first things, but we can't. And when we attempt to do everything, we end up making trade-offs we'd never consciously choose. We trade family time for yet another meeting. We trade our health for one more project. We trade our peace of mind for fleeting approval from others. The escape from this trap begins with a profound internal shift, an awakening to three core truths. The first truth is the invincible power of choice. McKeown tells a story from his early life. He was studying law in England, not out of passion, but because everyone told him it was smart to, quote, keep his options open. He was miserable, trying to straddle his law studies with his real interests in writing and thinking about leadership. He was succeeding at nothing. Then, on a spontaneous trip to America, a mentor said something that changed everything. Not advice, just an assumption. He said, if you decide to stay. In that moment, McKeown realized something profound. While he logically knew he could quit law school, he'd never truly felt it was an option. He'd forgotten his power to choose. By not choosing, he'd inadvertently chosen a path he didn't want. He'd become helpless. Researchers call this learned helplessness. In a classic experiment, dogs received small electric shocks. One group could press a lever to stop the shock. The other group had a lever that did nothing. Later, when both groups were placed in a box where they could easily escape by stepping over a small barrier, the dogs who'd had the working lever immediately jumped to safety. But the dogs who'd been powerless just lay there accepting the shock. They'd learned their choices didn't matter. We do this to ourselves constantly. We say, I have to go to this meeting, or I have to answer this email. We forget that in almost every case, we're choosing to. The moment you replace I have to with I choose to, you reclaim your power. This is the first, most fundamental step. We may not always control our options, but we always control how we choose among them. The second truth is the unimportance of practically everything. This sounds harsh, but it's incredibly liberating. We've been taught that effort and results have a one-to-one relationship. Work harder, get more. But reality doesn't work that way. McKeown introduces the Pareto principle, the idea that roughly 20% of our efforts produce 80% of our results. This isn't just business jargon. It's a law of nature. A few things are vital. Most are trivial. Think of Warren Buffett, who famously says his investment philosophy borders on lethargy. He doesn't make hundreds of investments. he makes a tiny number of massive bets on businesses he's absolutely certain about, and he holds them. In fact, 90% of his immense wealth comes from just 10 investments. He understands that what you don't do is just as important as what you do. The non-essentialist thinks almost everything matters. They see all opportunities as roughly equal. The essentialist understands that almost everything is noise, and only a precious few things are exceptionally valuable. Their job isn't managing everything. It's discerning the vital few from the trivial many. This leads to the third truth, the reality of trade-offs. You cannot have it all. You cannot do it all. The non-essentialist asks, how can I do both? The essentialist asks a tougher, more honest question, which problem do I want? McKeown tells the story of Southwest Airlines. For decades, in an industry infamous for losing money, Southwest was consistently profitable. How? Because its founder, Herb Kelleher, was a master of trade-offs. He was crystal clear about what Southwest was, a low-cost airline. So he made deliberate choices: no meals, no assigned seats, no first-class service, just point-to-point flights at rock-bottom prices. Did he alienate customers wanting a meal or fancy seat? Absolutely. But he didn't care. He wasn't trying to please everyone. He was choosing to be one thing, and to be the absolute best at it. When competitors like Continental Airlines tried copying them, they failed spectacularly. They tried to straddle their strategy, keeping their expensive full-service model while also offering a cheap, no-frills service called Continental Light. It was a disaster. They tried being two things at once and ended up being good at neither. They ignored the reality of trade-offs. Saying yes to one thing requires saying no to another. Every single time. When we don't choose, someone else chooses for us. Our boss, our colleagues, our clients, even our families. And we end up living a straddled life, just like Continental Airlines, making sacrifices by default that we'd never make by design. Once you've absorbed these three truths, choice, the vital few, and trade-offs, you're ready to begin the disciplined pursuit of less. McKeown breaks this into a simple three-step process you can apply everywhere: explore, eliminate, and execute. The first step is to explore. This is the art of discerning the vital few from the trivial many. Paradoxically, essentialists actually explore more options than non-essentialists. The non-essentialist gets excited by every shiny idea and jumps without thinking. The essentialist systematically explores a wide range of options to ensure they're choosing the absolute best one to go all in on. To do this, you first need to create space. In our hyper-connected world, we've lost time to simply think. Frank O'Brien, founder of a fast-growing company, initiated a radical practice. One full day each month, he brings his entire team into a room with no phones, no email, and no agenda. The purpose is simply to escape, to think, and to talk. He says if his people are too busy to think, then they're just too busy, period. We have to design this space into our lives. Jeff Weiner, the former CEO of LinkedIn, schedules up to 2 hours of blank space on his calendar every single day. He calls it his single most valuable productivity tool. Bill Gates famously takes a think week twice yearly, secluding himself to do nothing but read and think about the bigger picture. You don't need a full week. Start with 20 minutes of reading classic literature in the morning instead of checking email. The goal is escaping the reactive noise so you can hear the signal. As you create space, you must learn to look for what really matters. McKeown shares a beautiful story about the late writer Nora Ephron. In her high school journalism class, the teacher, Charlie Sims, gave students a set of facts. The principal announced that the entire faculty would travel to Sacramento next Thursday for a colloquium on new teaching methods, featuring famous speakers like Margaret Mead. The students all dutifully wrote their leads, summarizing who, what, when, and where. Mr. Sims told them they were all wrong. The lead to the story, he said, was this: "There will be no school Thursday." In that instant, Efron realized journalism wasn't just regurgitating facts. It was figuring out the point. It was seeing what truly mattered to people. An essentialist is a journalist of their own life. They look past extraneous details to find the lead story. They don't just see the dots of each day. They connect them to see the trends. A key part of exploration is play. We're taught from childhood that play is trivial, childish, a waste of time. But Stuart Brown, founder of the National Institute for Play, has studied thousands of people and concluded that play is essential for a healthy, innovative life. Play isn't the opposite of work, it's the fuel for it. It broadens our options, serves as an antidote to stress, and stimulates the creative, exploratory parts of our brain. And finally, to explore effectively, you must sleep. McKeown calls it protecting the asset. The best asset you have for making a contribution to the world is you, your mind, your body, your spirit. And the most common way we damage that asset is neglecting sleep. He tells the powerful story of a driven, successful CEO named Jeff, who traveled constantly and averaged 4 to 6 hours of sleep nightly. He was crushing it until his body started shutting down. It started with panic-like attacks, then his heart rate became erratic, and eventually he could barely stand. His doctor gave him 2 choices: take medication for life, or disengage from everything for a year or 2 to recover. He'd burned out his most important asset. We live in a culture celebrating sleep deprivation as a badge of honor, but the research is crystal clear. Sleep drives peak performance. In a famous study of violinists, the single biggest factor separating the best from the good wasn't just practice. It was sleep. The top performers slept an average of 8.6 hours nightly, plus naps. Sleep allows the brain to make new connections, solve problems, and see clearly. As McKeown says, our highest priority must be protecting our ability to prioritize. Once you've explored your options, the final filter is to select with extreme criteria. This is where the mantra, "If it isn't a clear yes, then it's a clear no," comes in. McKeown suggests the 90% rule. As you evaluate an opportunity, think about the single most important criterion for that decision and score the option between 0 and 100. If you rate it any lower than 90%, automatically change the rating to 0 and reject it. This simple rule prevents you from getting stuck with the 6s and 7s. It forces you to wait for the 9s and 10s. It's about trading a plethora of good things for the few truly great ones. This brings us to the second major step: eliminate. Once you've identified the vital few, you must have the courage to cut out the trivial many. This starts with having a crystal clear purpose, what McKeown calls an essential intent. Most corporate mission statements are vague, jargon-filled platitudes inspiring no one. Think of a company saying its mission is profitable growth through superior customer service, innovation, quality, and commitment. It's meaningless. An essential intent, by contrast, is both inspirational and concrete. It's one decision settling 1,000 later decisions. When the British Prime Minister asked Martha Lane Fox to be the UK's first digital champion, she could have written a long, boring job description. Instead, she and her team created an essential intent: to get everyone in the UK online by the end of 2012. Simple, concrete, inspiring, measurable. That clarity empowered everyone on her team to say no to anything not serving that one clear goal. With that clarity, you must then learn to dare. to use the power of a graceful no. This is often the hardest part because we're wired to get along with others. We fear social awkwardness. We don't want to disappoint people. McKeown tells a beautiful story about Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He'd planned a special date night with his 12-year-old daughter Cynthia in San Francisco. They had an entire evening mapped out, down to the minute. But as they were leaving a convention, he ran into an old friend who enthusiastically invited them both to a fancy seafood dinner. Cynthia's heart sank. She imagined her perfect evening evaporating. But then her father, after warmly greeting his friend, said, "But not tonight. Cynthia and I have a special date planned, don't we?" He took her hand, and they ran off to have an unforgettable night. Cynthia told McKeown that in that moment, her father bonded himself to her forever, because she knew what mattered most to him was her. That's the power of a no fueled by a yes to something more important. A clear no can be more graceful than a vague, non-committal yes. We must learn to separate the decision from the relationship. Denying the request isn't denying the person. Sometimes, even after saying no, we're still trapped by past commitments. This is where we must learn to uncommit. We're all susceptible to what psychologists call sunk cost bias, the tendency to keep investing in something, even a losing proposition, simply because we've already invested so much. McKeown uses the Concorde jet as a prime example. It was an engineering marvel, but a complete financial failure. Yet for decades, the British and French governments kept pouring billions into it, long after knowing they'd never recoup the money. The more they invested, the harder letting go became. We do this in our own lives. We stay in jobs making us miserable because we've already spent 5 years there. We keep pouring money into failing projects. To escape this trap, we must ask ourselves a powerful question. If I weren't already invested in this, how much would I invest in it now? The answer is often zero. We must have the courage to admit failure to begin success. We must also learn to edit our lives. Jack Dorsey, founder of Twitter and Square, says he thinks of the CEO role as being the company's chief editor. An editor doesn't just say no. They use deliberate subtraction to add life and clarity to the work. As Stephen King famously said, you must kill your darlings, even when it breaks your egocentric little scribbler's heart. Kill your darlings. Editing our lives means cutting out good options to make space for great ones. It means condensing our efforts so every action counts for more. And finally, to eliminate the non-essential, we must learn to set limits. In our always-on world, boundaries have been erased. Work has crept insidiously into family life. An essentialist sees boundaries not as constraints, but as liberation. McKeown shares the story of a school next to a busy road. The children would only play in a small area near the building where teachers could watch them. But then someone built a fence around the entire playground. Suddenly, the children were free to play anywhere and everywhere. The boundary didn't limit their freedom, it expanded it. When we don't set boundaries, we're imprisoned by the limits others set for us. When we have clear boundaries, we're free to operate in the space we've deliberately chosen. This brings us to the third and final stage: execute. Once you've explored your options and eliminated the non-essentials, how do you make doing the vital few things almost effortless? The first key is building in a buffer. We live in an unpredictable world. The only thing we can expect is the unexpected. A non-essentialist assumes best-case scenarios and constantly gets thrown into chaos when things go wrong. An essentialist expects the unexpected and prepares for it. The story of Joseph in Egypt is a perfect example. He interpreted Pharaoh's dream to mean 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. So he advised Pharaoh to store 1/5 of the harvest during good years as a buffer. When famine came, Egypt was saved. We can create buffers in our own lives. The simplest way is adding 50% to any time estimate. If you think a project takes 2 hours, block out 3. This simple practice relieves the stress of running late and creates space for the unexpected. It's the difference between driving 1 inch behind the car ahead at 100 miles per hour versus leaving safe distance. One is stressful and dangerous. The other is calm and controlled. Next, we must learn to subtract obstacles instead of just adding more effort. McKeown tells the story from the business parable The Goal, where scout leader Alex is trying to get his troop of boys to a campsite. The problem is, one boy, Herbie, is incredibly slow, and the group gets spread out over miles. At first, Alex tries getting the fast boys to wait. But as soon as they start walking again, the gap reappears. Then he has an insight. He puts Herbie, the slowest hiker, at the very front of the line. Now the whole troop moves at Herbie's pace. The key is no longer getting the fast boys to speed up, but doing everything possible to make things easier for Herbie. Alex takes weight out of Herbie's backpack and distributes it among the other boys. Instantly, Herbie's pace improves, and therefore, the entire group's speed improves. What's the slowest hiker in your life? What's the single biggest obstacle holding you back from what's essential? Instead of piling on more effort, focus all your energy on removing that one constraint. When you do, everything else becomes easier. An essentialist produces more not by doing more, but by removing more. To make execution effortless, you also need to harness the power of progress. The most effective form of human motivation is making progress, even in small wins. In Richmond, Canada, a new police superintendent named Ward Clapham was facing high youth crime rates. Instead of just cracking down harder, he created a program called Positive Tickets. Police officers started catching young people doing something good, like wearing a helmet or throwing trash in a bin, and giving them a ticket redeemable for rewards, like movie passes. Over a decade, this simple system of rewarding small positive actions reduced recidivism from 60% to just 8%. Instead of going for one big, flashy win, Clapham started small and built momentum. When we start small and celebrate progress, we create a positive feedback loop, making the essential path the easiest path. This leads directly to the genius of routine, what McKeown calls flow. The non-essentialist thinks execution requires raw, forced effort every time. The essentialist designs a routine, making the essential the default position. Think of Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps. For years, he followed the exact same routine before every single race, from the stretches he did to the music he listened to the way he stepped onto the starting block. His coach also gave him a mental routine. Every night before bed and every morning upon waking, he'd visualize the perfect race in slow motion. He did this for years. By the time he stood on the block for a real race, winning felt like the natural extension of a routine he'd already successfully completed 1,000 times. The right routine removes the friction of decision-making. Our brain's resources are finite. When we create a routine for the essentials, they become automatic, freeing up our mental energy to focus on new challenges and creative thinking. Finally, to execute on what's essential, you must learn to focus on what's important now. This is the mantra of Larry Gelwicks, a high school rugby coach with one of the most incredible winning records in sports history, 418 wins and only 10 losses. He teaches his players to constantly ask themselves what's important now, not the last play they messed up, not the final score, but this moment, this play. The ancient Greeks had two words for time, chronos, which is chronological, ticking time, and kairos, which is opportune, qualitative time. Kairos is experienced only when we're fully in the moment. The non-essentialist is always stuck in chronos, their mind spinning about the past or worrying about the future. The essentialist learns to live in kairos. They know the only time they can truly act is now. This isn't about multitasking, it's about multi-focusing, which is impossible. We can't concentrate on two things simultaneously. When we're truly present, our execution becomes not only more effective, but more joyful. This brings us to the final, most important idea. Essentialism isn't something you do, it's something you are. To live an essential life is to be an essentialist. McKeown points to Mahatma Gandhi as a powerful example. He began life with a clear path to becoming a wealthy lawyer, but a journey to South Africa awakened him to a higher, more essential purpose: liberation of the oppressed. From that moment, he began a process he called reducing himself to zero. He eliminated everything not essential to his mission. He wore his own homespun cloth. He spent a day weekly in silence. He owned fewer than 10 items when he died. His life was a testament to the power of a single, essential focus. Most of us have a little essentialist and a little non-essentialist inside us. The question is, which is your major and which is your minor? When you start living this way, you don't just add a few good habits. The very core of who you are begins changing. The choices become easier. The no becomes more natural. The joy in the journey becomes deeper. You begin realizing this one wild and precious life isn't a dress rehearsal. Every day, every choice is the real thing. And you're faced with a fundamental question. Will you look back on your life and see a long laundry list of trivial accomplishments? Or will you see a few things that truly mattered? The life of an essentialist is a life lived without regret. Because when you've correctly identified what's essential and invested your whole self in it, you can be proud of the life you've chosen to live. As we come to the end of our journey through essentialism, it's worth pausing to think about why this message feels so urgent right now, especially for someone your age, standing at the threshold of so many important life decisions. We live in a world that celebrates being busy. We've somehow confused activity with achievement. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor and brag about how little sleep we get. But as Greg McKeown so powerfully argues, this is a terrible bargain. It's the path of the non-essentialist, a path leading to a life that's full but ultimately unfulfilling. The most powerful lesson in this book, for me, is the quiet revolution it proposes. It's a revolution against the noise, the pressure, and the endless demands of the modern world. It's the quiet courage to say, no thank you, to good opportunities, so you can say a resounding yes to the truly great ones. It's the wisdom to understand that contribution isn't about doing more, but about doing what matters most. For a young person today, the pressure to pad your resume, to join every club, to be on every social media platform, and to keep your options open is immense. But Essentialism offers a liberating alternative. It gives you permission to be selective. It gives you permission to choose a path, not because it's what everyone else is doing, but because it's where you can make your absolute highest point of contribution. This book isn't about becoming a minimalist who owns nothing. It's about becoming a maximalist on the things that matter. It's about investing your precious time and energy so deliberately that your life, instead of being a scattered mess of small commitments, becomes a masterpiece of focused intention. So how can you start living this way today? You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Remember the power of small wins. Here are 3 simple things you can try this week. First, for the next 7 days, before you say yes to any new request, no matter how small, just pause. Take 5 seconds. In that pause, ask yourself, is this truly essential, or am I just saying yes out of guilt, pressure, or fear of missing out? That simple pause can be the difference between a choice you regret and a choice you celebrate. Second, identify your slowest hiker this week. Think about your schoolwork, your goals, or even your personal life. What's the one obstacle that, if you removed it, would make everything else feel easier? Don't try fixing everything at once. Just focus on removing that one single constraint. And third, schedule 30 minutes of do-nothing time. No phone, no computer, no music. Just you and your thoughts. You might find it uncomfortable at first, but in that silence, you'll start hearing the quiet signal through all the loud noise. The journey of an essentialist isn't an easy one. It takes courage to go against the grain. But the reward is a life that isn't just successful, but significant. It's a life of clarity, of control, and of deep, abiding joy in the journey. That was a summary of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, by Greg McKeown. We've explored the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only be a map. The real magic happens when you walk the path yourself. It's in the quiet moments when a particular story or simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect, and you see your own life with fresh eyes. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you live your one precious life. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together. Thank you for listening.